Who's ready to grow some fruit trees? Everybody raise their hand, right? So thanks for braving the river today. It's going to be a wet one, but we're nice and dry in here for a little bit, right? So who's got existing fruit trees they came down to learn a little bit about? Okay, we got quite a few. And who's like, I want fruit trees, but I don't have any yet? You got a little bit of both, all right. So we'll go through, you saw there's a handout. There's actually kind of two of them. About a month ago, I teach a class on pruning for production, and that is all on fruit and berry pruning, nothing else. You can ask me after the class. I'm not going to talk a lot about that today because we did that a month ago. The video's online if you want to find it on the YouTube channel for Sunnyside. And I brought a few extra handouts I had from that class. If you need one after, just grab me. I'll print you one, or you can always access it on our website as well. So you'll see it on there from, I think it was January 17th or so, if I remember my Saturdays right. So, but thanks for coming. We're going to talk fruit today with the Arctic freeze we had for a week. Everything here is about a week behind, so we literally just finished getting the fruit over yesterday. So we do have pretty much everything we're going to carry for the season out there. There's not a lot of figs yet. We'll talk about those. We don't do persimmons, bare root. I want them to grow and show that they're going to live before we'll sell them to you. So we do have a nice crop of persimmons, but that will be a couple of months down the road, like mid-March, April or so, before we're really likely to let those go. So those don't go bare root, but everything else we talk about today, we've got bare root access back there. We plant them in little fancy pots with good soil. We just pop them out, dunk them in a tank, put them in a bag, you take them home. I want to start by making this clear with bare root. Who's dealt with bare root before? You got a few? And who, it's good, I'll put it this way, it's a great way to save money. It's a great way to save a lot of weight. All I do is take that tree home in a plastic bag and I do something with it today. This isn't something I take home and put in the garage and say it's wet today, I'll do it in the next weekend or something. You can wait a little bit, but we need to lay that outside, cover the root system with soil temporarily, and then I come back and plant it Wednesday or Saturday, or I don't care when you do it. You got probably a month or so to get it in the ground. The sooner you put it in, if we had that magical little camera underground, you would be shocked how much root development happens here in the winter, especially 55 degrees today is a little warm. So it'll start to establish, you'll be that much ahead of the game. But it is a great time to do 30% off for all the bare root stuff back there. So they look potted, but they're not. I will add this. Last year we had a lot of pears left. I don't throw things away if they're in great shape, so we kept a lot of our pears. You will go out there and you will not be able to bare root some of those, of course, because they will have a root ball on them. So those you can have, the class today, you can have 20% on those as well if you want some of the extra pears, okay? So we have everything in. There are some stuff still to trickle in as we go through the spring, but the vast majority, I think, of what everybody here is going to be looking for, we got it ready to rock in the back, okay? So if we talk kind of fruit to starters, just some kind of basics. Washington's, I've been here my whole life except 1 year. It's a really fun state because we have two totally different climes between east and west. And most folks I've talked to shop at the grocery store, go to the farmer's market, and they're like, what do you mean I can't have Moore Park? And what do you mean I can't have this Haven Peach? And what do you mean I can't do this? That's Eastern Washington. Fruit comes down to really two things, what we call chilling units, how many hours below 35 degrees we have in the winter, and how much heat and how long that heat lasts in the summer. I go to Wenatchee, Yakima, anywhere over there east of the mountains. What do I got? I got both. I got a much colder winter and I have way more heat to get those things to ripen. Over here, as the rain pounds on the greenhouse roof, we have what? Wet spring, which is going to not help us with disease. We have cold in the winter to grow anything. It's not the lack of cold, but sometimes we don't have the nicer summer. I think we're kind of would all agree it's trending in the right direction. Whether that's good or bad is a different discussion, but it has been a much nicer weather here in the summer and much longer. That's going to allow us to do some things maybe we haven't. It's not a cold hardiness thing. It's not the cold that we do get in the winter. It really comes down to the heat and when does it ripen, and disease is a huge part of it. If I asked everybody in all honesty who likes to go out and spray their fruit trees, who's going to raise their hand? Nobody. Nobody wants to spray. Nobody wants to do the extra work. If we don't have to spray and we have a healthy tree, then we're going to have a much happier home orchard too. So a little bit of spraying is not the end of the world, but if we try to grow those peaches I mentioned, apricots that don't grow over here, all those things, you're going to be out there spraying once a month the entire spring in the wet to try to keep the disease to a minimum. Then we get to summer, maybe we're a little better. So what we carry here, choose wisely. You know, we get Western Washington stuff. I'm not carrying those things that don't tend to do well over here. But there certainly are some cool apples that, again, you might get a touch a little bit more scab than another one, kind of thing. So kind of ask questions, is always plan it out, you know, and decide, hey, I don't mind. I want Cosmic Crisp apple. That's the #1 selling thing around here these days, I'll tell you right now. And it's not the best against scab. Does it kill the tree? No. Is it the end of the world? No. But if I want clean Cosmic Crisp, or Honey Crisp would be the second most popular apple, I need to watch the spray a little bit on some of those. Not every week, not every month, but a couple of times a year to keep them clean. So keep in mind the difference between east and west is #1. We always want as much sun as possible. That's never going to change. 6 hours is minimum. I would up that if it was me. We're not growing fruit trees in shade. We want them in as much sun as possible, especially all afternoon. So I don't mind the, you know, west or south side of the house where the sun comes up, we're shaded by the house or some trees till 10, 11, and then we have sun all afternoon. That's fine. What I don't want is east side of the house, sun till noon, and then deep dark shade the rest of the day, bit and block. That's probably not enough to get reliable ripening and happy trees long term, okay? A big one, I think, whether you're planning it out, and I think this has a little bit to do with decisions on pruning. You know, I would always rather have the trees down and spreading. I don't want to get an orchard ladder to get up 40 feet in the air and fight the birds for the cherries, as an example. I want to be able to get on a little 2-step ladder or something, pick my fruit I want, and I'm good to go. So spacing and pruning are huge, because those to me breed towards sun, again, exposure, and air circulation. If I have good sun, good air moving through, and space in between my trees, I'm going to have, again, much less disease, much better ripening. I need that airflow through there. So I've got a typical backyard. I'm not going to plant a fruit tree every 6 feet. That is not going to last very long and look very tidy. You're going to have to butcher those things back. You'll have no sun underneath. Not a good thing. I need a 10, 15-foot circle, you know, at least, to give those trees happy. If you've got the space, give them some room to grow. You know, we need to plan that out, give them a little extra, get a little extra spot. You'll see the next thing on there is soils and drainage. You know, none of these things mind our acidic soil. You know, they don't care about the rain in the winter. That's not the end of the world. But we do have to have adequate drainage. The pears and the apples are going to be much more tolerant of heavy soils. If I have a pear or apple, maybe a little more clay, a little bit wetter in the winter, my chances are still pretty good. It's fine. If I have that spot, I am not going to have luck with cherry, plum, peach, apricot, all those stone fruits with the pits. You're going to have a much tougher time growing that stuff if the drainage is bad. So keep that in mind as you're kind of looking at your soil. We would always add compost. You know, I'm not going to buy a bare root tree and dig a little 1.5 foot hole. I want to dig a really good sized hole and amend that soil so that I've got a great start on that fruit tree for the season. So I would say at least 2, 2.5, 3 feet wide, a couple feet deep. We have our little native pile off to the side we dug out of there. I'm going to grab compost or something similar, amend that about 1/3 to 2/3 of my native, and then backfill with that mixture, and then always use a nice couple inches of mulch, whether it's bark, whether it's compost, something on top to help keep the weeds down, conserve the moisture here that first summer, and then off we go, okay? So keep an eye on your soil. The two things, well, again, maybe I'll show you on the trees here when we talk about grass, but the two big things a lot of folks asking here is fertilizing. You know, when am I supposed to do this, and what do I use, and all the rest? You know, I would always go organic with something I'm going to eat. I mean, I think most people in here would probably agree. So get it a good organic fertilizer. This isn't a miracle grow thing. This isn't liquid steroids thing where I'm going to pump it on there and watch it grow like a weed. I want slow, steady, and nutritious and natural is the way to go with the orchard. So we always put this on special for the class, but we got our EB Stone Organics fruit berry vine food. That's good for all your fruits and berries, except blueberry we'll do here next month, and that's roadie food. They like acidity, but this is good for everything else. 20% off. Grab it today while it's on sale. Stash it in the garage and you got your spring dose. We got 4-pounders and 15-pounders. So big bags if you got a bunch of trees. If I look on the back of that It's going to tell me right there how many years old is my tree about, how large is it. This is how many cups I'm going to sprinkle out around that tree to get it fed if it's an existing one. If I'm going to plant a new tree, you know, half a cup's plenty. We want to mix that in the hole when we plant that bare root, and then off we go. If we have an existing one, we want to use a little bit more, and sometimes the bag's a little better money saver if we want to do it that way, okay? So if I'm feeding a new tree, everyone understand when I say I dug my hole, I can sprinkle a little bit of that in that mixture as I'm planting. That tree's got a great start. If it's an older tree, you know, I'm standing where the trunk is, I'm not going to pile my food right around my feet. I want to go out to the edge of that tree, they call it the drip line, where the edge of the branches are. Maybe I come in a couple feet, and that is the zone that I want to put a big donut of fertilizer around, because that's where my root system's most active. It's where it's going to knock it up, and I've got, again, happier trees here for the season. Now, I don't think you're going to have to feed more than twice a year. You could certainly go a little more if you want to. Tree struggling, maybe one more time, but I would always try to get this out here in this March, you know, February to early March time frame for my first dose. My second dose would always be in that late May to early June. That'll give me a nice push of growth over the summer. So happy trees last year. 2 fertilizers is probably plenty, and sometimes even 1 might suffice. But if you want to go kind of perfect, I try to do those 2 times a year, and you will be all set with healthy trees. You got a quick question?
Same with the berries, raspberries?
Yeah, we'll do berries here next month, but same idea with the berries, we'll be the same way.
What
Okay.
about fruits, the fertilizer spikes?
So spikes, she asked about fertilizer spikes, and that's not the end of the world. Maybe they've got an organic one that I haven't seen, but you're typically on a synthetic fertilizer with those, and it's not the end of the world. You know, we don't do spikes here, so we're going to stick with organic. But if same thing, I'm going to go out there and pound those in the ground inside the drip line so the root system can get those activated. Okay, next one is grafting and rootstocks. Now, I brought a couple trees in. It's going to be hard to haul them around and show you as we go. But if you kind of look over, if we looked at this, make combinations first. So see that little confetti tree we call them on the far side over there. It's got orange, it's got yellow, it's got pink, it's got white, it's got all those label colors, right? So that is a cherry in particular. We also have those in apples and pears and Asian pears. That tree has 5 varieties on 1 trunk. So as we start to talk into space saving, pollination, and all this stuff we'll talk about today, you know, that's a way that I can get a multitude of cherries and some different flavors and not have to plant 2 different trees to cross-pollinate. Does that make sense to everybody? So especially with apple and pear are the 2, you have no chance of getting fruit on 1 tree. Cherries, we've got some self-fertile options, some of the others, but apple and pear, you know, if you've got limited space and I want a nice variety of apples, look at your combinations. That's going to give you a nice variety of fruit without having to plant multiple specimens. Okay, that's kind of one half of the discussion. Now, all of these are going to be grafted on a rootstock. If I look at a tree here, I'll make my staff mad and pull one out so they have to replant it after class. So this is what we do when you buy it, bare root. See, look at that. We pop it right out of there. Now we have a bare root tree. Except I'll make a mess in here. So you got to we soak it a little bit in water to make sure it doesn't dry out. We pop it in a bag. This is how you take it home. But this is a little new variety of apple, actually, one of the Lucy apples. If you haven't seen them yet, they're pretty cool. But this is what I'm talking about. So this is my graft. Okay, everyone can kind of see that knob right there. So this specific root system has been grafted on to the apple that I want. Lots of different roots or options, different growth habits, dwarf, mini dwarf, semi-dwarf. You've probably heard a lot of those terms. You know, we try to stick with pretty much mini dwarf and dwarf on the apples like this one. But this is the point I wanted to bring up this time, is don't ever bury this graft. This is something I don't see happen a lot, but some customers I've talked to thought, well, if I plant that, and there's my ground level all the way up to the branches, it'll stay smaller, right? No, it'll be dead in about 3 months because it'll rot the trunk out. We have to leave that graft out of the ground, and that's probably more like this, because then I can apply my 2 or 3 inches of nice mulch and I can start to garden underneath that. Does that make sense? So don't bury the graft. That's the #1 thing here. And that is, you know, probably man's invention to say, okay, we're going to get you some different rootstock options again that will dictate how big that tree will grow. Okay? So for us, like I said, dwarf is the way to go. We have to sometimes sub a few things in that are semi-dwarf just to have it, because there's no dwarf available. Semi-dwarf's still very manageable. And if you're a good pruner, you can probably keep them all about the same, but you'll have a little bit more pruning to do each season as well. So grafting and rootstocks is huge, whether we talk combinations again or the specific single variety we're choosing, what's that grafted on as far as the root system. Now you heard me mention self-fertile, need a pollinator. That's the next kind of topic to understand. You know, you have to make sure you get two that work together. You know, and this is sometimes confusing if you haven't played with fruit. You know, we need our native mason bees to buzz blossoms when these are in bloom, or we have no fruit. We have no bees, we have no fruit to enjoy anywhere. I mean, that's the point blank truth. So we need orchard mason bees out. Maybe that's the reason you're not getting some on your tree that you have already. No bees out, no pollinization. It's not gonna kill the tree, but you get minimal fruit kind of thing. But look at your options. What will get fruit on its own, and what do I have to have two different varieties to cross-pollinate? A self-fertile tree, this is an example of one right here. This is Italian plum. So European plums are self-fertile. If I'm a bee in the spring and this pops into flower, I can just buzz around this single tree and visit blossoms, and I'm mixing what I need to do, and I'll have maximum fruit, okay? If I go to the apple, that poor apple I ripped out of its pot, and I planted that Lucy apple, I'm never gonna get an apple on it, because it needs a cross-pollinizer. Apples all need two. That's why we talked about combos a little bit. So all apples will go together. You know, if you look when we talk apples, other things like cherries, I have two options. I've got some that are self-fertile, some I have to buy two. Okay, does that kind of make sense to everybody? Because that's a huge thing. We want you to take a tree home and get something to pick and enjoy here long term, and not call me back in 4 years. Say, yeah, this tree's growing great, I get blooms every year, where's my fruit? You know, because they don't have a cross-pollinating suitable variety. So ask our staff. A lot of that information's on our list. We have pollination charts posted out there on the specific types of trees, so you can kind of look at the map and say, oh yeah, I see what he means. Every apple does every apple as long as I avoid that one. You know, there's some real easy answers to that question, okay? Now, disease resistant and genetics has been the huge trend, especially disease resistance. We're lucky enough to have Oregon State University just south of us and Washington State here in our fine state of Washington, both great ag schools that do a lot for this type of thing for the home gardener. So we have research stations all over the state. The Master Gardener program / Wazoo will test different things, try this, try that. I know they've been trialing a number of different peaches up there in Mount Vernon and our local one to see what would grow, what needs to be sprayed, what actually ripens, all those questions. But that's take advantage of it. I mean, we're a great fruit growing country up here in the Northwest, and looking at what survives, what thrives up here is going to be huge, and those programs will really help us with that as well.
Who's in that burger?
What's that?
What organization?
There's a Washington State. Yeah, Washington State's got a little cooperative extension right there. Yeah, and they have the fruit orchard right there. You know, again, we talked about the fertilizing time frame. Watering and maintenance. You know, we'll talk a little bit about spraying as we go through. Watering is not a huge thing. On a new tree, yes. On an older one, not as much. But if we have weather like we've had the last number of years, and we always have a dry Mediterranean summer. I mean, we very rarely skip that. Maybe it's after the 4th of July and goes into October, but at some point we have 3-4 months of pretty good weather up here in the Northwest. So those are the times of year I need to maybe water a little bit. I don't think you're gonna have to touch an old fruit tree until that point, and you're gonna stop in September anyway. But those 3 months, if my trees become drought stressed at all, the first thing I'm gonna do as a plan is what? Drop my fruit. It's done. I'm gonna conserve myself. Then if that's not enough, I'm gonna start going brown, yellow, and drop my leaves and try to go dormant early. So if you had, lady was in last week, said, man, I got a beautiful plum, I've had it for years. Last year, 1 billion little plums just dropped off. I didn't get to eat anything, and we figured out it just had gotten too dry. You know, that was phase 1 of I'm gonna lock down and I'll see you again next year to try to preserve myself. So keep in mind, it's not a weekly thing. It probably is twice a month for most people, but say I'm out weeding, you know, working in the yard on a Saturday, it's like, oh, you know what, I can make sure that apple tree's happy here for the next couple weeks. Get the hose out, turn it on a trickle, put a soaker hose around it, whatever you're gonna do, and really soak the daylights out of it then walk away. You know, you're good for a couple weeks. I don't have to worry about it. This isn't like the lawn or a perennial garden that I have to keep up a sprinkler system. I would never worry about that. But a drip or a soaker hose, or just a lot of times I'll just manually just turn the hose on a trickle and just move it around every few minutes and just soak the entire root zone. I got a happy tree again for the next few weeks, okay? So keep that in mind as we get into the summer. Now, the one thing I'll say is dormant spray on addition. So we had almost everybody raise their hands who has existing fruit. So who had a problem with their fruit last year? Be honest, we all did. If you got a pear tree, you had a problem for sure, and if you didn't, you're lying. Because every single pear had rust in the entire 3 states. So apple scab, rust on the pears, peach leaf curl, you know, we go on and on. Those aren't the plague. It doesn't mean you can't grow fruit, but if you did have some of that on your tree last year, this is the time to get rid of it. I don't want anything left in the ground. If I had any fruit, period, I would clean up all the fallen fruit, all the leaves that drop. Make sure there's nothing hanging in the tree. Get all that out of there. And then at some point before we bloom, you still got a few weeks here, we apply a dormant spray. Now I know that I start spring clean. Okay, not the same issue I had last year, and I can kind of move on, and here we go for another season, and let's give it a little better try. Is that making sense? If I spray something natural, it's gonna hurt anything. I never spray and bloom. I'm gonna say that twice. Never spray and bloom. Because what's going to happen? No bees. Yeah. I'll do a quick question. We're going to try to do questions at the end, or I'll never get through this.
About that pear rust, the junipers.
Yeah.
Do I need to rip those out, or do I?
We'll talk about rust here in a second.
Okay.
Okay. So let's try to do. I'm here all day, so you can hang out here and we'll do questions after. How's that? Okay. So dormant spray are the 2 things, and again we put these on special. So this is OMRI listed horticultural oil. If I had a bug on my tree last year and I'm worried about it hanging out, because these little guys will hang out in the bud scales and behind the branch and you won't even see them when they lay eggs. If I spray oil on something, it coats and runs and covers everything, right? Cracks and crevices and all the wrinkles on my fingers, cuts off oxygen, so I don't have that. Whatever's underneath there can't breathe, so you win against the bugs. So oil, totally bug related. Okay, much more bug. And this is something I can use in the season. It's not just a dormant spray either. Liquid cop is disease, and this is what I would try to twist your arm and tell you to get out there and get done here before bloom. So this form of copper will glue to your tree for about 30 days, even in the rain. You got a dry day to get it on. Once it dries on there, you got about 30 days of a shield up that will keep you from getting these problems. So if I do it before bloom, maybe I wait a few weeks after bloom and get it a second time. Maybe one more time, late April, May, I'm gonna avoid the peach leaf curls, the scabs, the blossom blights, all those typical problems that we see in wet weather. The problem is a lot of times it's not you, it might be your neighbor. Don't tell your neighbor I said that. But it might be your neighbor, somebody down the street. All these things blow around in the wind and the rain. So that's not going to change up here in February, March, April. We're going to have wind and some rain. So you could spray and walk away and you were clean, and now the neighbor's cherry is covered in something. It spores out, blows back on, and here we go again. There's the rust. You know, you brought up pear rust. That's an alternate host. A lot of these diseases, you know, they infect the pear, but it lives in the western red cedar or the juniper. So are you going to run around and cut every single juniper and every single western red cedar out? Maybe the juniper, sorry, but not the western red cedar. I look over here and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna really walk over here and cut down all these cedars around here so that I don't get rust. It looks the pear. Does anyone know what pear rust? Everyone kind of seen it. It looks like the worst plague. Like, oh my God, I gotta burn that thing and throw it in the trash. It looks horrible, but it's not. It doesn't get on the fruit. The leaves look hideous, and you're stuck with it for the year. It is what it is. Every single pear had it in Western Washington last year. I can tell you that. You didn't do something wrong. We had the perfect weather pattern for pear rust last year. But again, you know, that's the question he asked. Do I cut all my junipers out of the yard? I don't know. You know, it might help. I doubt it's going to, because there's probably a cedar back there, and as soon as it spores out in the wind in March and April, it just blows right back in the wind, and here we go again for another season. So the spray will be the way to try to keep those a little bit cleaner. Okay?
Weekly, monthly?
Oh, never weekly. I want to make sure this is clear. Like this again, if I choose copper, which I think is the superior spray to use in the winter and frankly in the growing season, if I look at that label, it's going to tell me do not use over 90 degrees. How many days were 90 degrees last year? And who's ever going to really be out having to spray their tree in August, because that's the only time it's going to be hot. So I could use this, you know, March, April, May, June. I can use this through the wet season and I'm good to go. So that's why we like this one better. This is a month to me, whether it's wet, whether it's dry. I apply it on a dry day, not today, we're not going home to spray, or tomorrow, or probably Monday until the river's gone, right? But if I apply that on there, it's gonna dry onto the wood, and again, I've got a shield for about 30 days. So if her tree blows in, tries to infect my tree, I'm good. You know, and 2 months later, now it blows in, okay, I might have to do this again to keep it out. Is that making sense? So 30 days should be plenty. Other things, maybe a little sooner than that, depending on what you want to use. All right. So we got information overload here for the general fruit knowledge. Yes.
So the liquid copper, I can just get that. I don't need that in the other bottle.
You can use both. Again, the oil is more about insect. The copper is what I would worry about here, more about disease. The one bug that I worry about is apple maggot. Anybody got apple maggot? And this isn't going to do you any good at all against apple maggot, except again, making sure nothing's left stuck to the tree is not a bad thing, but cleaning up debris, mummified fruit is number one. You know, there's a little maggot in there waiting to hatch out and infect 80,000 more apples in the spring if you don't get rid of it. So that does nothing. Apple maggot flies, we'll talk about here in a minute, but it's a little different discussion. But other scale, you know, maybe I had scale on my apple, other insects, absolutely I would go for oil as well. And I can put these in the same sprayers, other thing I like. I don't want to do it twice. So I can mix these together and get everything at once if that's my choice, okay? Now if we get into, I'm gonna whip through some specific, how are we doing on time? We're doing all right. So I'm just gonna mention some specific types of fruit, and we'll kind of pause after each one. You can ask me some questions on each group. Does that work for everybody? Because there's a lot of choice out there. So if we start with kind of apples, pears, Asian pears, these are what we would all call spur fruits. Does anyone kind of know what I mean when I say spur fruit? You know, that's the number one term you gotta learn if you're gonna grow those creatures in your yard. Look online if you don't know what they look like. I can go show you on one of ours. The spur is all that matters. That's the only place I'm gonna get a cluster of bloom and some fruit to eat, which is why I'm trying to grow this tree, right? We're not gonna grow the apple because we wanted a pretty ornamental tree up by our front door. We want to pick it. So spur is all that matters. That's the whole thing with spur fruit. If I look at an apple, sorry Lucy, I bare rooted you. You know, these are young. You know, there's nothing wrong with these trees. That's a little nice. I think we try to get a little bigger trees than most nurseries. There's not one spur on this entire tree. I have no apples to pick this year. I will down the road for sure, but not right away. This is all what we would call primary growth. This year, you're gonna see the secondary wood come out. The third year, I get spurs. And from then on, I have spurs and more spurs, as long as you don't go out and prune them off in the winter, which is why I go look at what a spur looks like. So it's almost a 3-year process with spur fruits. I have 1-year-old wood. This grew last year. This year, I get the secondary branching and the spurs. Then I pick the third year. Does that make sense? And so you'll have that cycle done for you by Mother Nature down the road. But with young trees, you know, some of these will take a couple years to get fruit. And then from that on, you prune them right, I'm in business. You know, we got a happy tree that's watered and fed. I'm gonna have delicious fruit to eat every single summer and fall as we go forward, okay? So spur fruit's a little bit different. And again, if you're asking after, we have a couple old pears out here in one of the backyard of Steve's old house. I can go show you what they look like because those are loaded because they're old trees. But that's the only place I'm going to get production. Now you'll see with apple, like I mentioned earlier, we would have 2 different rootstocks available out there, dwarf and mini dwarf. So dwarf, if I'm a good pruner, maybe 10 or 12 feet is all. Mini dwarf, probably more like 8 if I'm a good pruner. I had mini dwarfs at our place in Cleellum for 30 years, and I could get on a 2-step ladder and pick every single apple on the entire orchard. So you can keep mini dwarf much lower and spreading. Again, that's all about the rootstock, depending on the room you have. Doesn't change the size of the fruit. Somebody always asks me that. Well, does that mean I get a little smaller apple? No, it's all the same. It's just the growth habit would be a little different, okay? All apples require cross-pollination, period. There's no exceptions. So don't go buy an apple unless you feel like you're rolling the dice and your neighbor might have a lucky apple that a bee might find his way. And I would not do that because you'll be disappointed. So get more than one apple or a combination. You know, five on one, you're all set. You got a nice variety used for everything, and I don't have to buy 2 trees. The kicker with apple is there's some sterile ones. So if you understand what I mean by that is, let's say anyone know Gravestein? One of my favorite old apples, great for cooking and pies and all kinds of stuff. Let's say I'm a Gravestein, I'm sterile. I can't produce any pollen to help another tree. So if I had a Gravestein and a Cosmic Crisp will cross-pollinate my Gravestein. My Gravestein will do absolutely nothing for the Cosmic Crisp. So now I gotta have 3. Okay, we ate up more of our yard with the orchard, which is not a bad thing. So in that case, I want a Gravestein, I'm gonna probably get a combo. What I try to tell people with apples is, if you like eating apples, I think most of us do, get a combo with a nice mix on it, and then buy one you really like Cosmic Crisp. Now I have a little variety, I've got my pollination covered, now I get the best of both worlds kind of thing. If you got room for 2, that's what I would suggest trying, then you got everything kind of covered, okay? So there are some newer ones, Cosmic Crisp, Sunrise Magic. Those are both apples out of Washington State, to be honest with you, and those are only available to Washington State residents. I could not tell you how many emails and phone calls I get from Boston and Virginia and Ohio and all over the country that beg and plead me to ship them one of these Beirut, which we don't do anyway, but it's like, nah, sorry. Keep these for the Washingtonians. You don't get them. So you can go buy our apples in the store, but you're not going to grow one. How's that? So those are both total patents, Washington State, Eastern Washington bred apples that you can only have here. We get a lot of both those because those are both popular. There's also some pears out there that are on the newer side, like Ready Robin and Maxi. Excellent pears. You ever seen the round pears, like Asian pear, right? But European pear texture and flavor. So it's like I took my Bartlett and put it in an apple, you know, if that almost makes sense. So some of those crossed type pears are really good. They can pollinate both regular pears and Asian pears, either way. I can do it, I can kind of mix all pears together, if that makes sense. So I can use them for both, but it's a great fruit to grow, and they're very disease resistant. Those are towards the top of the totem pole against our rust, pear blight, and some other things out there as well. So Ready Robin and Maxi are the 2 we carry. We've got some nice ones out there of those. The brand new for this year is the Lucy apples. I pulled poor Lucy out of her pot, but I saw these last year. This is from a private family over by Prosser, just across the mountains. This is another one. I think I don't think they've restricted it just to the state, but there's not a lot of these out in the trade so far. But this is a red flesh apple, and the taste is unbelievable. I tried them at a show last year, and if you look at the picture on there, you'll see what I mean. I slice it open. The whole heart of that apple is pink to red, and the flavor is very berry. So you take the apple, you're like, wow, that's apple. But man, that tastes like almost like cran apple, you know, like ocean spray juice. You get a lot of raspberry and some berry flavors there too. They're very good. So we have 3 types of the new Lucy apples out there. Lucy Glow, Lucy Gem. I knew I'd forget one. There's 3 of them. How about that? So you got 3 Lucys out there. The last one there is common bugs and diseases. So I mentioned apple maggot. I'll just talk about that for 1 second. The problem with apple maggot is that's a fly. So unless you feel like going Rambo and standing in your yard like 24/7, standing next to your tree with your trigger bottle, ready to go, ooh, I see one, ooh, I see one, you're never gonna get them because it's a little tiny fly. She flies in, you won't notice, and she just sits there and lays eggs in every single apple on your tree, and then they burrow to the center. You cut your apple open and go, well, that's disgusting, I'm not gonna eat that, because it is disgusting and you don't want to eat it. So try apple maggot. The only way you're gonna win is A, clean up the tree for sure. If you had apple maggot, I would be fumigating that tree in the fall. No fruit, no leaves, nothing left on the ground. I'm gonna get both of these on it together, and then I'm gonna hang pheromone traps. That's the only thing that's ever worked for me. Well, I should say 2. Pheromone trap, I hang it in there, I put sticky glue on it. That little maggot fly smells my pheromone and goes, ooh, there's a nice apple. She flies to it and gets stuck. And then you get the pleasure of walking out there and going, oh yeah, I got 100 of those gooey little creatures. You slime them off, you throw them in the garbage, and then you apply another layer of that biodegradable glue and you keep catching them all summer long. That's the only way you're gonna win. The other option, I call them apple pantyhose because they look like pantyhose. Who does the maggot barriers? That is a labor of love. My mother does that too. So if you feel like all your apples are about nickel size, right, in about a couple months down the road, and you get on the ladder and you want to walk out there and tie a little pantyhose around every one of your apples, I bow down, because that's some serious time right there. All right.
But it works.
It works. It does. That's the only way. She can't get to the skin, and they ripen. There's nothing changes. It's a great way to go, but that's a lot of apple maggot time. How's that? I would say that to me is the bug. I think we talked about para, so I'm not going to talk about that anymore. Just keep it in mind. It's not you. It's not something you've done wrong. There's certain years, mankind has been here a long time, but we have not been here nearly as long as A, insects, or B, diseases, and they will often win until we adjust and figure out a way to get them back. So last year was the worst I've ever seen for para. Every single para I saw anywhere had it. So don't feel alone. It looks like the plague again, but it's not. They'll be fine. Para blight would have the black, and that is what I would worry about more, and we got to get copper on that, because para blight would rot my fruit. The rust makes the leaves look like the plague, and the fruit's usually still fine, but the blight will kill shoots and rot my fruit. You'd have black everywhere, and you would see that on your tree as the other. On the apple side, probably the most common thing is going to be scab. You look at a scab apple, and that is a tough one sometimes to tell as a homeowner. Is that apple maggot or do I have scab? If I slice that apple in half again and look at the cross section, I'm always going to see a brown tunnel to the center, and you'll probably find that little larva in there that she left you for apple maggot. If I cut it open and I'm like, well, that looks gorgeous, except for that little brown spot on the skin, that's scab. It's not going to hurt you. I wouldn't eat it because it's still kind of gross, but I can peel it. I could cut it, use it for all kinds of things. I don't have to throw scab apples away. If you walk away from scab, you probably have some apples that have scab you are going to throw away, because it'll just get spotted all over the place and you'll get behind. But again, cleaning up, spraying will really help you keep that to a minimum. And choosing, maybe it's like, what, I'll be honest with myself as a gardener, I am not going to do what Trevor suggested and walk out with copper. And I'm probably going to forget, and I'm going to walk away, and then you're going to be disappointed, right? So maybe don't buy the Cosmic Crisp or the Honey Crisp or one of those. Maybe I buy Liberty or Spartan, or a really good apple that has that built in as a natural resistance. You're going to have way less scab on still some really good eating apples like those, versus going for the ones that we have to maybe watch a little bit more. Okay? Yes.
On the maintenance issue, I realize you're a fan of those products.
Yeah.
We've been using neem oil.
Yep.
But I would imagine that the difference is that probably washes away after a while.
No, neem oil is not bad to use on anything. I use it on everything in my yard, but it does nothing in the winter, first of all. So we cannot use neem oil as a dormant spray. So that's a different situation. In the growing season, absolutely, I have no problem. Neem oil. We could talk old smelly rotten egg like lime sulfur sprays. There's all kinds of good stuff out there. We choose these because I think they're the easiest, the most effective, and I can put them together is a huge thing with me. Otherwise, I'm mixing this and spraying this, and then I'm going to get that, and I'm doing that. I'm doing everything twice almost.
So the dormant oil does what again?
Dormant oil cuts off oxygen. So if I have any eggs, insects left in the winter, that's going to cut all those out of there, and then I start over again. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes.
Is there anything not to use that on in the fruit trees?
Probably the one fruit tree you gotta be careful of is plums, and not spraying close to bloom, just to be honest with you. So we'll talk, maybe we're okay on time. So if we talk about bloom, if you looked up online, they would probably use all these fancy words like pre-bloom and popcorn stage and all this other. None of it really, it does matter, but it really doesn't matter when it comes down to it. We never spray something in bloom is point one, and B, the copper, if the plum wood is the one tree that if it starts to swell, we just kind of, okay, I missed my time before flower, let it bloom, let the bees do their thing, and then get it afterwards. Because there's just a couple things. Always read the label. How's that? Because it's going to tell you right on there. You know, be careful using this on this. Really, the plum is the only thing I would worry a little bit more about, and this one we tend not have to spray as much anyway. But the rest of them, you'd be fine. Yeah, be fine. Just never in bloom again. Okay, so on to the next one's cherries. I brought the combo cherry. I think is the we brought one in here. So this is a glacier. Okay, right here. Now this one I get a little bit more instant gratification. The spur fruits, we got that process of a 1-year-old wood, then I get my spurs and then I pick. So I got to wait a couple years and then off we go. All this other stuff we're going to talk about today blooms and produces on 1-year-old wood. So all the stuff that grew last year will feasibly bloom, and if the bees are there and I do my pollination, I'm going to have cherries right away. I mean, I'll probably get a handful of cherries on this tree the first season, and then more, and then more, and then we just keep getting better. Of course, if you can keep the birds from grabbing them, right? So the cherries would be one as an example of 1-year-old wood. So I don't have to be as careful, you know, about what I prune. But what I never want to do is walk out in the winter and just top out all the growth that came out last year, because then what'd you do? You cut off all your 1-year-old wood. You don't have the flower. You're not going to get the production that you expected. So I would always kind of look to tidy, thin it out, yes, shape, perfect. But I'm not walking out doing this. If I'm going to really try to take an old tree and get it back into shape, that's going to happen after I pick it, because now I can grow out the rest of the summer, hopefully set my flower buds, and I'm still good to go for 2025 that way with some wood. If I walk out in the winter, shave it off, it's going to grow. You're not going to hurt the tree, but you're not going to have very many cherries that season, or plum, or peach, or anything like that, okay? So dwarf cherries is pretty much all we do. We got what they call Gisela rootstock. I've dealt with it almost 30 years now. There's some guy that's getting rich off all of us all these years, because I figured out after about 10 that he collects $1.50 in his pocket for every cherry tree sold in the entire world. Think of that for a minute. Wow, that's a lot of cherries. He probably has got a tidy retirement fund going these days. But it's a great rootstock. It is the smallest, the dwarfest, most disease resistant. It takes a little bit more wet than some of the others. You know, if I buy a dwarf cherry, you know, I could expect to keep that again at 10, 12. Maybe I don't prune as much, maybe 15 feet. And I think some people I talk to have cherries that are like 40 or 50 feet tall that are old standards. So you can really reduce your size and get a massive amount of fruit. If I went over to a cherry producer in Yakima, Wenatchee, anywhere, that is what I'm looking at. 8, 9 foot tall trees that are absolutely loaded with fruit every year, because you take advantage again of that dwarf rootstock and proper pruning, okay? So the only, you can see on that next point there, the only cherry we carry that I have to get a second cherry for is Rainier. I think it's also the best one, in my opinion, but it's one I have to get to. Any other cherry and Rainier, I'm good to go. If I don't care about having Rainier, pick a Glacier, get a Stella, get a Lapins, get a Sweet. All the rest of the cherries back there are all self-fertile. So I can plant one tree, I've got happy campers. I don't have to worry about a second. Or, again, combo, 5-on-1 kind of thing. Pie cherries are out there as well, and I don't know who likes cherry pie. I'll raise my hand because I do. You know, these are our sour cherries. They're very heavy bloomers and really good for bees early and for cross-pollination. So even if you don't maybe like doing the sour cherry thing, it's not a bad idea to have that as in your mix if you have the room. If you don't, then pick your 2 sweet cherries and you'll still get plenty of cross-pollination, okay? What else? We talked combinations. I don't worry much on cherries. There's always weird creatures that pop in and out. You're always welcome to bring a sample, send pictures. The one thing I would watch for on cherries is what we call blossom blight. And when we talk about that disease, we would call it brown rot on cherries. If you had a cherry that gets pollinated, I get my little green cherries that start, and they turn brown, rot, and just hit the ground, right? About a month later, 6 weeks later, you probably have blossom blight. It comes a lot of times from ornamental cherries. If I had, you know, Mount Fuji or Kwanzan or weeping cherry in my yard, I can almost guarantee you there's a touch of blossom blight in there somewhere. When I see them, that may be what's getting onto my fruiting cherry as well. If you have blossom blight, look up some pictures. You might even be able to see it online. But you'll see the tree go into flower, and just a couple days later, they're already brown. You're like, well, that was quick. It didn't last very long. And then you probably have those little shoots die back. So if I leave blossom blight unchecked, I might have some issues down the road. I'm not going to get much production, and it might end up killing a major chunk of my specimen tree too, if you look at it that way. The only other thing I watch for is gummosis. Anyone ever had gummosis? Peach, anything in the rest of the talk here. Peach, apricot, nectarine, cherries, plums, all the same family. But I would look out at my trunk and I would see an amber colored ooze coming out of the bark. I got no cure for that. There's nothing you can do to stop that. I hate to tell you, I've had trees live for 20 years, produce great and never skip a beat. I've had other ones on my own that were dead in a year from gummosis. So, get them from a nursery like Sunnyside, not to toot our horn, but I pay an extra exorbitant amount for our fruit trees because we get all what they call virus screen, VC certified fruit that it has none of that stuff in the genetics. If it does, I hate to say, I've seen it at Lowe's and Home Depot many times over the years, like, wow, dude, you should not be selling that peach to somebody. It's already got gummosis on the trunk now, and it's just a little tiny whip. So it's a bacterial infection that's in the wood. There's no way you're going to get it out of there. My dad used to sand, flamethrower, burn it. It's like, yeah, it might help for a little bit, but eventually it's in the tissue, so it's going to get it, okay? So anything on cherries. And now the last thing is, of course, I don't know anybody who likes putting a 20-foot net over their cherry tree, right? So try to share with the birds, but you're really going to have to be up on your cherry picking skills fairly quickly because the birds will probably take a good chunk of it from you. Yes?
And we're going to use the same spray product.
Same spray. The copper is a great spray against blossom blight. Absolutely the same thing I would use at my house too. So, yeah. Okay. So next up, really close to cherries are our peaches, apricots, nectarines, plums. All that I kind of throw into one. Now, if we do peach first, everybody who has a peach tree already. Everybody wants a peach tree. I don't know what it is about that fruit up here, but we sell. I think I got 120 frost peach. Everything else is 10, 20, 30, 20, 10. Everybody buys peach. So the only peach you're going to grow up here until the last couple years is frost. That was found out in Granite Falls. I would never, ever, ever use the word immune. I want to make that sure that's clear. People see disease resistant and they think, oh sweet, I can plant it and walk away. If you're going to grow a peach, you got to spray. And point blank, I'm telling you the truth. You've got to spray. If you don't, you're going to be disappointed. Peach, apricot, nectarine, those three. I have to spray. I cannot walk away in our wet spring weather. And I choose my best chance with a disease-resistant kind like peach, like a frost, or we carry one called Salish Summer now. It's a white flesh peach, really good peach, and it's another local one that would be much better. The third one, I'm trying to get out of Vancouver Island. There's one called Nanaimo that's spectacular, that's close to frost too, but that's it. Don't go, I see them at Costco every single spring. Do not buy your peach tree at Costco, please. Because you're going to buy one that belongs in Yakima, one in Wenatchee, not one that belongs in Seattle, Everett, Marysville. It does not grow over here. You will not have luck of growing those things. It's exactly the same thing with nectarine. Puget Gold and Harglow. Those are the two. Anything else, walk away. Those are the only two nectarines we're going to grow. It's or the apricots, excuse me. Harglow, Puget Gold. If I do nectarine, it's Hardy Red. I'm not growing the store nectarines that I find, again, Eastern Washington, not West. That's probably the biggest difference to me in the two sides of the state is that part of fruit. Peach, nectarine, apricot, cherry, plum. A little bit different flavors on each side of the mountains, okay? So those are all self-fertile. Peach, nectarine, apricot. I buy one tree, I plant it, bees mix my pollen. I don't need a second variety. Is that good with everybody? Okay. So the other one there, plum, is where we get maybe a little bit more confusing. So we have what we would call European plums. So everyone knows Italian, like prune plums. Oblong, usually purplish. There's yellow, there's other colors, but it's the oblong, oval-shaped plum, okay? Those are all self-fertile. I don't need a second tree. why we probably sell 100 Italian plums every year, because it's a no-brainer. I can plant it, get some great fruit. I don't have to worry about a second variety, okay? Japanese plum, much larger. Usually find them at the grocery store. Shiros and Beauties, Satsumas, lots of good varieties. They all grow great here, but I have to have 2 different varieties to cross-pollinate. I can't just plant one Japanese plum. I need 2 to cross-pollinate, then I get fruit on both, okay? Don't care which 2 they are. They all bloom the same time, but pick 2 different ones to go together, all right? Two different Japanese plums. Yeah, I get a Beauty and a Shiro, or a Shiro and a Satsuma, or Nadio, and you can pick any ones you want, but just get 2 different varieties. Yeah, 2 Shiros will not help you. You can't get 2 of the same.
The Italian prune.
Italian is self-fertile, European. I can just do anything I want with the European plums, okay? Nope. Nope. Yeah, different bloom time, different genetics. So we got Japanese is one, European's a little different. Yeah, a little different, okay? So a couple maybe specific things. I mentioned spraying. If I'm gonna grow peach, nectarine, apricot, get the liquid cup on sale. I gotta get that sprayed before it blooms. I'm gonna wait for the bees to do their thing. I have petal drop, no color left, the bees are gone. I'm gonna get it again, and I'm gonna get it again in a month, and I'm gonna get it again in a month, and I'm gonna keep doing it every month until I dry out in summer. So I'm telling you, you do it, you're gonna be happy. You don't, you're gonna be disappointed. So a little extra spraying, you can have great tree. Maximum sun, good drainage, a little bit of spraying, you've got a happy tree. The other thing with those 3, when I bring my pruners, I did, is when you buy one of these today, either the staff will do it for you, but I also want to prune about 20% back on the twigs every single spring if I can. Now, 20-foot tree, you're not going to get up to the top, but you can help it out a little bit. All the problems that blow into the wind are going to get into these tip buds and start working its way down my wood. That's how I'm going to get peach leaf curl or some of these issues. So if you take this home, you know, we're going to help kind of thin it out for you to get you a nice start, but I'm going to literally walk along here and try to prune down the tips of these twigs and cut to an outside bud so this tree starts to develop a really nice spreading shape. So it doesn't take you a minute to go along here. I'm just going to get this one done now that it started. So we're just going to tip all these back just a little bit and get the shape we want. And now I've got it. Oh, you got to do the top of it too. So now I've got a much better chance just by spending a couple minutes and doing that, especially while they're young. I got a much better chance of that being a little happy peach here for the season. Okay?
You want to do that here?
Just peach, nectarine, apricot. Those are the 3 that I would always do those with. The rest of them, I don't think you're going to have to worry about doing the same amount of pruning. Okay?
So I could get a pair. I'd do some pruning in the fall after the harvest.
Yeah, we'll talk pruning after. Okay? So all the available rootstocks, all these things we have on dwarf again. I don't think we had to sub anything to semi-dwarf, so you'll see all those out there. I will tell you, no matter how many I get, the first things to sell out every year are frost peach, the nectarines, and all the apricots. So I have about 60 apricots, 30 nectarines, and I have 130 peach this year, which will hopefully last a little longer. But when they're gone, they're gone. I can't get this again. So if you want those things, I wouldn't wait much longer than into early spring. You're not going to come down here in May and find any of that stuff left to buy. I bet you it's all gone like it always is, okay? So just remember, European self-fertile, plums, Japanese, we have to buy 2, and you'll see them separated out there in the orchard. The last thing on there is insect disease. I think we've beaten peach leaf curl up already is the main thing I would worry about on all those. And it's the same as the cherry as the plum. We want to watch for that blossom blight. That's the one big thing in that whole family blowing around in the wet spring. Make sure we don't have the dieback and we've got healthy flowers to get the fruit on. So watch the blossom blight a little bit. Okay, last 2 things here. So we carry a lot of specialty stuff. We do as many nuts as I can find every year. We get some figs, we get some persimmons. I got some mulberries again, which are, anyone had a mulberry? They are delicious, but you can't ever find them in the grocery store because I think they only last for like a day or two after you pick them. So you gotta kind of grow your own mulberries. They're pretty good, and the birds like them too. I'll warn you. Birds eat all yours. Birds get a good chunk of them too. It's a good bird tree. Yeah, a little messy too. They got some juice in them, but we have all that back there. I put on the first on the list there hazelnuts, filberts. Everybody knows those. That's a little different tree in that there's no bee action involved with filbert. That's wind pollinated. But it doesn't change the fact I still need to have two different compatible filberts or hazelnuts in my yard. Mother Nature's wind blows, mixes the pollen when the catkins drop, and I get nuts on both of them, right? For me and some for the squirrels, of course, too. So if I have those, I gotta get two if I'm doing filberts. We carry 6 back there. They're all immune to filbert blight. That's been the plague for years with no cure. But again, Oregon State Ag School developed a whole series of these that are immune to filbert blight. Think of like old Dutch elm disease. Nobody grew elms, you know, for decades because they just died. Now you bred that out. The same genetics have been bred out of that by man over the years. So I don't have to worry about filbert blight down the road, okay?
How many years till you get filbert?
You might get a couple the first year, definitely the second one. Yeah, definitely the second one. Walnuts and almonds. You know, walnuts, we carry a couple. If you know walnuts A, I'm gonna keep going up. That's not a dwarf tree. How big do you think the walnut gets? Like 40, 50, 60 feet. So I gotta have some room, A. It's a gorgeous tree with age. Old black and English walnuts are fabulous, but this isn't a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. This is probably a 10, 15, 20 year tree. How's that? You're gonna wait a while to get nuts and develop that shape. We get them pretty big. We get Cascade, and I found an old school one I like called Franquette. So we have both those back there, and they're both great nuts, but you gotta give them room and wait a while. That's one that'll take a little bit. Almonds are fun. My dad has 3 huge almond trees now. He kind of got me onto these. I'm like, are you really gonna grow that here? They grow great. I mean, honestly, watch the same as kind of the plum and the cherry. We watch a little bit of blossom blight in the spring. They would look like a flowering cherry if you saw one. You know, big bushy cherry, light pink flowers in the spring. Great almonds. They fall in the fall. You collect them, you dry them, crack them. You got your own almonds if you want to grow. They're plenty hardy up here. We get 2 typically. I got zeroed out on my other one, but we do have the Hall's Hardy almond back there. That's another one like these. I think there's 30 of them maybe, and they're gone, they're gone. That's probably another one that sells out really, really quickly. Yes. Walnuts, excuse me, the almonds will be about 20 by 20. That's not a little small tree. You'd need some room to let that get nice and bushy. And then of course battle the squirrels for some of your nuts on there too, right? Figs grow well here. We get a cold winter like this one. Maybe we lose a little wood on them, or maybe they're young. Sometimes they may die towards the ground a little bit if they're young and newly planted, and they shoot off the root, and here we go again. There's a lot of figs to choose from. You will always get 1 crop up here. If we have a decent summer, you might get 2. You know, kind of one in July, early August, and then another one towards late fall. Sometimes you got to take the second one off the tree and put them inside the window to get them to ripen because we don't have enough sun in the late summer to get them to go. But it's a cool tree, big tropical leaves. They take up some room. There's some great dwarf ones now. I warn you, they got horrible names like Little Miss Figgy is one. It's just like, wow, that's actually kind of clever. And there's another one called Fignominal. It's pretty cool. It's a little dwarf one. But those I could even grow in a pot. You know, I could have a cool fig on my patio in the sun, have a little bit of figs to pick on it if you want, but it's a fun looking plant anyway. Or I can get Desert King or Peter's Honey or a lot of other ones and just grow them in the ground, just like I do any other tree, okay?
How much water for the fig in a pot?
Figs will need regular irrigation. They root out very fast, so keep that in mind in pots. It's not gonna grow in this pot. We're gonna need a pretty decent sized container, even for the dwarfs. Yeah. Let's see, persimmons. You know, this is one I'll be honest, I love persimmons. I buy them, I love the juice. I think that's a cool fruit. But I've always kind of been resistant up here to grow them. You know, I think a lot of people get the wrong ones, to be honest with you. Again, a lot of the traditional persimmons you would buy in the grocery store ripen too late. You're going to be in November before ripening, and I would say our chances of having sunshine and ripening weather all through October into mid-November are not as much on most years. I think we can probably agree on that. So be careful what you choose. We try to get early ripening persimmons in, and some fun ones like coffee cake and chocolate, again, that pushes my ripening 1 month earlier, that I'm probably going to have better luck with getting a reliable crop on them. I'll say this, you know, I would put persimmon, you know, just as a plant, a really pretty plant, with probably top five fall color of any tree you've ever seen. I mean, they are gorgeous in the fall for leaves. So if I had one, it's like, great, I got some fruit, awesome. You know, I still got a nice looking plant in the yard that would give me some seasonal, some fall colors, great. And maybe I don't get fruit every year, but choose wisely on the persimmon. That's probably not to shy anybody away, but maybe not one for the beginning fruit gardener. Work your way in with some easier things, and then, all right, I'm up, let's give it a try, and we give the persimmon a try. Maximum sun, great drainage, and good air circulation, and you'll probably be okay. But again, the weather dictates, I think, a lot of times what happens with persimmons up here.
Does that become a big tree?
Persimmon's not too bad, probably 15 feet, by 15 feet or so. Last one on there is mulberries. Mulberries is one, you know, I think they're delicious to eat. They are a little messy. The birds love them. The last time I had one growing up was frankly just for the birds. It was fun to just sit there and watch them flock in and peck all the berries off every time they ripened every summer. It's kind of like a long boysenberry or long blackberry. That's about what they look like. Super long. They got great flavor, but not something you'll ever find in the store because they just don't keep. So if you're growing one, you got some fresh berries to go out there and pick and eat for a few weeks in the summer, but not one you're going to find to purchase in. We get Pakistan mulberry, we've got Black Beauty, and we've got Otis Weeping. We get a Weeping mulberry out there too, so we've got 3 of them available for mulberries. Okay, so last thing I'll mention, I'll kick you guys loose here. I'm going to do some research on this and probably incorporate this into maybe a new class. I've had a couple customers talk to me about this permaculture, you know, or a fruit tree guild, we call it. It's a popular topic among orchardists and people that are really serious about this. You know, you can read a little blurb I put on there about it, and I'll probably have a handout online here pretty shortly. But it's one of those things where, okay, I'm gonna grow fruit in my backyard. You know, what can I plant around the fruit tree as shrubs, ground covers, perennials, everything else that helps my fruit tree? So what fixes nitrogen in the soil? What's going to keep the bugs away? What might get the bugs so they don't get on my tree? You know, on soil chemistry. Oh, there's so many factors in it. I think it's a fascinating topic, but you're kind of creating a little ecosystem. And this just isn't about fruit. It could be berry, it could be the rose garden, it could be anywhere in your yard. But I'm going to do a little research this year and get a little more comfortable on that subject, because I think that's an interesting thought for down the road, you know, as we kind of create these areas in our yard. You know, it might be a nice way to go down the road, okay? So like I mentioned, we record the class. We'll wave to the YouTubers for a second. It'll probably be up on Monday. If you weren't bored to death here for this hour, you can watch it again, right? The sheets are always online. We have fruit tree lists online that will give you everything we carry from A to Z. Pictures on our website, pictures back on the trees there today. We got a lot of information out there to hopefully help you do this right. With the class, it starts today. Hopefully you'll do a little shopping. We got umbrellas if we need to. And you got all the way through Friday. So 30% off bare root trees out there. You come get whatever you want, except for the pears I mentioned that are already rooted. We can't bare root them, so you take them at 20. But there's a great maximum selection right now. The fruit tree food is on special 20%. And I kicked it off early today for the month of February. Compost, 25% off. Buy 3, get 1 free, bales or bags. You can never have enough compost behind the house. I probably have 12 bales back there right now, and they'll be gone, and I'll come buy 10 more here in a month. So lots of compost, mulching, amending, lots of things to use it all over the yard, not just with the fruit trees. So maybe take advantage of that sale as well too, okay? So we got some questions. And the dormant spray, 20% as well, if you want to grab the oil or the copper. Yes?
What about European chestnuts?
Chestnuts. It's kind of like the walnut discussion. My dad still has got a chestnut. He's still growing one. One of those things you got to use his time. You know, you're not buying a little chestnut tree and expecting to have the reward in probably 5 years, probably 10. You know, down there. Yeah, you can grow chestnuts up there. Yeah, I'm not worried about it. It's not the hardiness thing, but it would be a maximum sun and probably some patience. Yeah, you're gonna wait a little while. I don't either. Yes.
So this is a pruning question. I was probably a little too nice to my pear tree, and now I've got some big
Yep.
stuff. It's okay to whack
Okay.
those down and even it.
So I'll answer that, but again, I'll mention like a month ago, there's a specific class now because we ended up in the fruit class talking about pruning for like 2 hours for like years. So pruning for production, you can watch that, would help you a little more. It's online on YouTube, but it's the same answer. She asked about pear. So apple, pear, Asian pear, spur fruits are all the same. We can't change the way they grow. You prune them, what happens? The summer, you got 8-foot branches, go straight for the sunshine. Okay, now what do I do? So this is what I'm trying to say in that class, and I'll say it here too. If I walk out every year and I have a main branch, and I just shave all that off of there because I don't want to go up, is it going to kill the tree? No. But now I have no 1-year-old wood that I can keep to get spurs so that I have apples. So if we do this every year, you're going to have minimal production. So what I try to tell people is look at that branch, look at the 80 bazillion water sprouts or suckers that are heading for sun. They could be 10, 12 feet tall, and cut maybe 2/3 of them out, but I'm going to leave one here and cut it down and leave a 3 or 4 bud section. And then I'm going to skip some space and leave another one. Now I've got sun, I've got air, and I've got some wood that will start to develop the spurs and gradually get back up again. And I kind of play that game. It's at least once a year, and I'll be honest, with apple, some of them, especially if you did a major prune that hadn't been pruned for a while, you might be doing it twice. So I walk out and I do it maybe early summer, and then absolutely in the winter time. I like winter, and I don't mean winter like today. You could probably have at your fruit now, but typically, again, this is a late January to mid-February project before flower. I can thin it out, I can shape it a little bit. Okay, now I'm good with the size of it. Now I can get in and cut all those sprouts down and leave those shorter chunks of wood that will start to get the spurs and increase my crop exponentially year after year. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes.
Talking about earwigs. I'm finding this is the first year I'm having earwigs.
Earwigs getting up in the tree?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're in my tree, they're on my apples.
So if they get up into the tree, because this is something that'll come off the soil, I think what I would do, because again, there's a lot of natural sprays that would take care of earwigs. You could probably go look at many of them in there, and they'll list that as an option. But I might think about getting like sticky tape or one of the insect traps and just wrap on the bottom of the trunk. There's nothing that can crawl through that. You'll end up catching them. They won't even get in the tree. Yeah. Yes.
I have deer. Kind of fencing around.
I wish you luck. No.
I like my deer.
Yeah, I do too, and it's not, I'm not trying to ever kill Bambi. That's not what I'm saying. I fought elk, clay element, our stuff, same thing. It's like, okay, you can help me prune, but that's a little too much usually. That's a really tough one because we're not going to kill the deer. We can get some plants around that might help. You can fence them, yes, but I know my deer fencing was like 8 feet tall and it wasn't very sightly to go, oh, I see all your fruit inside that, military fence basically that surrounded it. I'll say this, when we talk about creatures, I hate to say look online a little bit, be careful, but there's so many things you hear from, she hangs ivory, old Irish Spring soap. Deer don't like the smell, they go to somewhere else, But then you try it and it's like, what are you talking about? He came up and ate the soap, It's just, it's really tough with deer. I would try a repellent for sure, it might help you. The stuff we're trying is probably a little bit more effective than just a repellent type of deal because it's gonna last a little bit longer. But we gotta be really careful with edibles in particular because we can't have egg solids and certain things and salmonella. So read your label on whatever product you look at. Make sure it's listed for use in the vegetable, berry, fruit side of it. and try a repellent, because I mean, besides putting a fence up, I don't think you're going to have much luck with the rest
The
of
only
it.
thing that worked for me was bucks marking their territory was a big dog.
Big dog. There you go. That's got to be a big dog. Yes.
Stink bugs.
Stink bugs.
We had them all over our peaches and our raspberries.
Okay. Well, and that's one again, you know, a lot of basic natural organic insecticides will take care of stink bugs. If you got them in the season, you know, anything you smother with neem oil would be effective. Spinosad's a great spray that won't hurt anything else in the yard. Again, just don't, as long as we don't spray and bloom, we have no danger of ever hurting our pollinator friends. So after they're gone, they've done their thing, sweet. We get into the, that's going to be more like a May, you know, May, June, July thing anyway, and we can go out there and get it with something natural.
Like a oil?
I don't think you'd even have to go oil. I would just go for like a spin-off. We've got a couple things I'll show you in the class. Yeah, got a couple things in the store. Yes.
On your calendar for your talks, you've got something that's called Gardening with Wildlife.
Yeah.
Will you talk more about wildlife and the fruit trees?
I am. I'm doing that. To be honest, I'm battling rabbits right now at my place in Everett. And so the Master Gardeners asked me to do a winter speaker series. I got a 2-hour, like 300 people lecture coming up in February down at Everett Station. That'll be on Silly Rabbit, That Planet's For Me, I think is what I called it. But that's what that's about, is we're going to deal with maybe some techniques to help with rabbit, with deer, with a lot of wildlife. I don't work for the Department of Ecology or the Department of Wildlife, so I'm, you know, when we talk about mountain beavers and all kinds of other creatures that might get in and do some damage in your yard, you know, I'll give you some tips, but I'm going to tell you, you know, talk to the county. You know, I don't even know what the rules are anymore, or what you can trap and remove, and you can't touch this and you can't leave that and all the rest of it. So, but we will. Raccoons is another one I've had a personal battle with the last couple years. So, yes.
What about sulfur? When do you apply sulfur?
Sulfur would be the same thing as using a copper. I don't do sulfur anymore. Well, some of the newer stuff doesn't smell as bad, but that's the reason I don't, is it just the smell. Yeah, sulfur tends to smell like rotten eggs, and most people don't like the smell in the yard for the couple days when they get the spray on. But old lime sulfur, there's nothing wrong with the spray. That would be the alternative to doing this. So anytime, again, before bloom, and then I can also use that during the growing season as well.
So if you have a liquid, or you've got your horticultural oil as a spray, and you can just attach the sulfur right on top of it?
Yeah, you have to go 2 different sprays, because those two you could not mix together.
Okay.
Yeah, unless it's mixed as a lime oil sulfur spray. There's a specific thing. That's why, again, we chose this because I can mix the two together and only do one spray. You would do your oil, and then you would do your sulfur after that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
I have an apple tree that I inherited. It's a pretty big apple tree that has green apples on it. Harvest late July, early August. A lot of times the fruit is brown inside before it actually looks bad on the outside.
Like brown all the way through?
So I can start with the core, but sometimes some of the trees bottom of the tree like that, they're just all brown.
And you don't find the maggot larva in the center where the seeds are?
I have some of that, but this is on some of the apples.
Well, there's a lot of, you know, again, I talked about bugs and diseases being here long before us and long after we're gone and buried. Bring one in if it happens this year, because I like to look at, there's black rot, there's anthracnose, there's all kinds of other things that we might get on an apple from time to time, and it's certainly correctable with the spray. But if you see it this year, bring one in, we'll cut it open and look at it, or send some really good pictures, and I might be able to tell in the pictures too. Yeah. All right, we got fruit overload. Look at that, the brains just stopped, so we're all going shopping. So if you go, I got lots of staff back there. Like I said, if you want to grab some trees, we'll get you set up bare root, take them home in a bag. You know, I mentioned about planning. It's not that you got to run home and do it in the next hour, but if you're like, I'm not going to do this till next weekend, wait and come down later in the week or buy them the day, just take them home. Everybody's got an open spot in their yard, just lay them on the ground. Even take your bale of compost you bought, just cover the roots with it for a couple nights, and you go back, pop them up, plant them, and off we go. Just be careful on the graft. Don't plant them too deep. Doesn't happen as often every year after year because I always yell about it, but someone will call me in 3 months and say, tree just didn't even leaf out, and then we'll play 20 questions and they'll bring it in and I'll go, okay, your soil level is halfway up the trunk. We got to keep the graft out of the ground. So, all right. So thanks for coming. We'll have a couple weeks, hate to say, I'm going golfing down at Bannon Dunes here next week for a few days. On my annual man trip to go play cards and golf with my buddies for 5 days. So there'll be a couple weeks with no class. Our next one coming up is terrariums, a little DIY class for houseplant lovers. We did kokedamas last week. It was awesome. Everybody had a great time. So if you want to sign up for that, I think it's $20 if I remember right. And you get to actually make a terrarium, take it home, and you can add it to your houseplant collection. I think that's the 10th. The 17th, that whole week, we display down at the Northwest Flower and Garden Show in Seattle. So all of us will be running in circles from the 10th to the 17th. We'll be down in Seattle, and then I'll kick off again that week after. That's your berry class and the rose class, Saturday and Sunday. So two of the biggest, kind of like this one, typically two of the biggest classes of the year. Come down and join me if you want to do berries on that Saturday and roses are on that Sunday. So we got all the roses are in and all the fruits in. That's all we've gotten so far. We're starting to trickle some more stuff in here as we get warmer and warmer here for springtime. So thanks for coming. Appreciate everybody. Yeah.